Hi everyone! So this video is about passive voice. So like the other video on your voice as a writer, this one really covers how you're coming across and how you're sounding in your writing. So for the most part, you want to write an active voice. APA really pushes for active voice, as does MLA and a lot of the other major style guides. Passive voice is really essentially when the object of the sentence becomes the subject of a sentence. So here you see we've got the "I'm loving it" McDonald's slogan, and to make that passive voice, "it is being loved by me." Very awkward, right? So you want the doer of the sentence, the subject of the sentence, to be the doer of the action, if at all possible. In passive voice, the object becomes the subject. And like I said before, passive voice is not a life sinker when it comes to writing, but it's also not something that you want to do on a regular basis, especially if it can be avoided. So why do we use passive voice? Sometimes we use passive voice when the agent is unknown, obvious, or unimportant. So if I have, the example here is my house was robbed last night. I don't know who did it. I don't even know if it was a man or a woman. I don't know their race. I don't know anything that is a marker. And furthermore, I don't even know the person's name or if it was multiple people. The point is, my house was robbed. I don't know who did it. When we talk about crops, major crops in states, so tobacco is grown in Kentucky. Well, we know that farmers grow tobacco, but this is an obvious statement that farmers are growing tobacco, so it's okay to have it in passive voice. It also might mean that you're using passive voice if you want the agent, the subject, the doer of the action to be protected. So if I'm teaching a class and I had 5 students who turned in their essays late, well, I'm not going to say, Bob, Susie, blah, 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 they turned in their essays late. I might just say many essays were turned in late, or some essays were turned in late. And those, the essays are the things that are being turned in. The people who are turning them in, though, they need to be protected because of FERPA laws, right? Students might need to be protected by name, and you might, to make this active, you might say students turned in essays late last night or something like that. But passive voice is acceptable in this situation. It also can be used when the object takes precedence over the agent. So this is the one that I used earlier. The point of the sentence, what I really want to draw attention to, is that tobacco and soybeans are widely grown in Kentucky. So this means that, I'm not taking the action away from the farmers, but the point of my sentence, what I really want readers to take away, is that tobacco and soybeans are grown in Kentucky. And also, when first person is not an acceptable choice. So for some research writing, you're not using I. You are using maybe the researcher did this, or you're using passive voice. So in this regard, the participants were chosen based on age and race. The active version of that sentence is, I chose participants based on age and race, or we chose participants based on age and race if you're doing a group kind of research project. So when possible, employ an active voice in writing. So a lot of times in writing I see sample sentences like, the study was conducted by Smith and Jones. Well, there is really no reason for you to use passive voice in this regard. So you know that Smith and Jones did the research. The subject is right there. This by phrase that you see, was conducted by Smith and Jones, that lets you know that that's the doer of the sentence. Those guys or girls or people are the doers of this action. So you can really make that active in a pretty simple way. So when the agents are clear and straightforward, and again, look for that by phrase. And by phrase, I mean by Smith and Jones, by second semester freshman, Well, we see the doer right there. Lectures are often skipped by second semester freshmen. They're very obvious. And then also, the times that we're actually using passive voice is really to avoid first person and empirical research. There are some standards that suggest that in quantitative research, first person is not ideal. So you would say the data were coded using constant comparison methods. You would not say I coded the data using constant comparison methods. So this table, I know it may seem very overwhelming. You can pause the lecture here to kind of keep this in mind. Most native speakers of English do this automatically. So if I say she will analyze the data and I want to turn that into passive voice, the data will be analyzed. We can switch back and forth from active to passive voice without really thinking about our verb tense. And by we, I mean native speakers of English. Non-native speakers of English, hello out there, you may have issues coming up with what exact verb to use when you switch it out. The point is to maintain your tense. So if you have started out and you're writing your paper and APA dictates that things are written in past tense, so you're going to be really looking for those past continuous, simple past verb constructions. So if the data, she was analyzing the data were being analyzed. So you want to maintain that past progressive or that past continuous tense. Again, this is something that a lot of native speakers do naturally because we have the grammar embedded in our psyche, but for non-native speakers, this table is really helpful, and even for native speakers, the table is helpful at least as a reminder that you're maintaining your tense. So what happens when you have a passive voice sentence and you really aren't sure how to change it into active voice? So let's look at it firsthand here. The retention of first-generation college students from Kentucky was examined by Smith. Now, your first indication of issue should be that you see that by phrase there. You see that Smith did this research. It has a clear agent. The object, or what is being researched, is lengthy for the size of the sentence. The tense of the sentence should be noted before you switch this into active voice, and then you should probably determine that active voice is good. So you can switch it very easily to Smith examined the retention of first-generation college students from Kentucky. And of course you want to make sure that 2003 moves up directly next to the researcher. And this recognizes Smith as the agent and as the subject of the sentence. The object is still emphasized by its length and presence in the sentence. So that's another thing with passive voice. If your object is really lengthy, retention of first-generation college students from Kentucky, that's a mouthful. Putting that in the object, we native speakers of English speakers are accustomed to lengthy objects or lengthy groups of words after the verb. We are not accustomed to hearing a large group of words before a verb, and it's really kind of sloppy writing. And then the simple past is found, that's also a passive voice, by eliminating the auxiliary verb was and maintaining the past tense. So we're maintaining simple past in there. Let's do it again. The researcher of the study selected participants from 2-year community colleges based on their hair color and gender. So this is an active voice sentence, and it's not a bad sentence. But if you want to change it to passive voice, if you think that passive voice is going to sound better, you really need to know that the highlight of the sentence is the participants. And that's what you want the readers to come, to get. You want the first thing that they see as what's important is the participants. The researcher's unknown. The writer is writing in third person to avoid first person. So instead of saying I selected the participants, you're saying the researcher. And then you're noting the simple past verb to change this over to passive. Here it is in passive voice. Participants of this study were selected from 2-year community colleges based on their hair color and gender. So this makes the object of the sentence really the focus, which denotes importance, right? We think that the subject is the most important part of the sentence. It eliminates mention of the researcher. He or she is not as germane to the sentence as the subjects. And then the passive voice conversion, you're adding were to maintain the past participle. So, if you need more help on changing active to passive, if you get feedback that, wow, you're using just way too much passive voice, and this video goes some direction, but you really need some extra help, the Writing Center is a great research tool for you, a great resource. So here's their information. You can access them online. They do online tutoring. You can see them in Cherry Hall. If you live in Glasgow, they've got a center there for you, so here's some information. Thank you very much.